Hello, and welcome to our Additional Needs Practitioner Self-Paced Learning Module 2, supporting families of children and young people with additional needs. My name's Mark Arnold and I look after the additional needs work at Urban Saints, and I'll be guiding you through this module as we explore how to support families of children and young people with additional needs practically and pastorally, as well as understanding some of the challenges that they experience. I don't know about you, but I always feel that when we're thinking about a particular group of people, in this case, families of children and young people with additional needs, that it's important that we hear from them. And so I've put together a short video for you to watch, which introduces you to two families. Those families are Kieran and his mum Lynette, and Bethany and her mum Becky. You'll meet them and hear a little of their story, as well as meeting folk from their churches and understanding more about how those families are supported well. So have a look at the video that's on the link at the bottom of your screen at the moment. Video 3, Invited to Belong, the full version including subtitles. And then when you've watched that, come back to this module and we'll continue on our journey together. I hope you found that video helpful. It's great to hear from those families, isn't it? There are a couple of bits in that video that always touch my heart. The part where Kieran says, "We're just like anyone else. We want to be a part of everything that's going on. Let us." Isn't that something that we want for every child and young person that we're journeying with? And also where Becky is talking about when Bethany comes out of her room in the morning, her hair all dishevelled, she's only just woken up, and she comes and sits on her mum's lap and says, "Mum, I can't wait to go to church again." And isn't that something that has to be our hope for every family that we journey with as well? As we go through this session together, we're going to be splitting it up into two parts. The first part will be having a look at some of the terminology that's important in this area. Sometimes people can get a bit worried or confused about what term to use. So I'm just going to very briefly highlight where there's information about this in your workbooks, but also what terminology we're going to use in this module. Then we'll have a look at a key moment on the journey of any family of a child or young person with additional needs, that moment around the diagnosis, and we're going to navigate that pathway from pre-diagnosis through to diagnosis itself, what that means for the families that are on that journey, and a little bit of how we can stand with those families and support and help them. We'll have a think about transitions, milestones, rites of passage, key moments in the life of a child or young person with additional needs and what that can mean for them and their families. And then there'll be an opportunity for you to respond to what we've looked at so far. In session 2, we're going to explore much more practical and pastoral support that as churches we can put in place to help and support families of children and young people with additional needs. I'll also highlight information, resources and further support that you can look at beyond this session to help you as you explore this topic more with the families that you're journeying with. There'll be another opportunity to respond to where we've got to so far. And then finally, we've got some case studies for you to have a look at so that you can put into practice some of the things that we've been looking at during this module. Now, before we get stuck into the session itself, I've got a challenge for you. We're all sensory creatures and we often need to respond to the sensory prompts that we receive. Maybe you, like me, sometimes need to fidget or fiddle with something to help you to focus and to concentrate, particularly if you're watching something like this. So now's your opportunity if you want to grab a fidget toy or something that you can use as a fidget or fiddle to help you as we go through this module together. If you haven't got a dedicated fidget, then you could use a rubber band or a pen to click or a piece of blue tack to squeeze. If that helps you, then just take a moment to grab something and then come back to this video when you're ready. Hopefully you've got what you need, and we'll crack on with our content in this module now. I said that we'd share a little bit about understanding the terminology. And in your workbooks for this module, you'll find that there's a page that covers this topic on page 11 in your workbooks. And it explores all the topics that are on the screen: accessibility, additional needs, disability, impairment, inclusion, and special educational needs. For the purposes of this module, we're going to be using the term additional needs. Additional needs is a broad term. It covers most of what's on the screen, the other areas that are there, all areas of disability, impairment, health conditions, mental health conditions. And so as we're talking about supporting families of children and young people with additional needs, we're bundling all of that together and understanding that 1 in 5 children and young people have additional needs of some kind. It's a big topic. And so there are lots of families that are journeying with children and young people with additional needs, many of them in our churches, and many of them really needing our support and help at this time. So the diagnosis, that key moment that often everything else sort of revolves around for a family of a child or young person with additional needs. But there will be a period before a diagnosis is delivered. And in fact, for many families, that diagnosis is yet to come. The diagnosis could happen at one of many stages. It could be pre-birth, if a scan identifies something. It could be at birth, but it could also be many years later. I've journeyed with lots of families of teenagers who are still trying to get an appropriate diagnosis for their child. But in that pre-diagnosis period, however long that may last, there can be a growing awareness in families that there might be something different about their child. There might be something that they know needs unpacking and discovering, but they don't know quite how to do that in those early stages and start to reach out to people to get the help that they might need. But it's a time that's a really worrying period for families. Often that vacuum of not knowing what the answers are about their child, what the diagnosis might be for their child, can create just a sense of filling that vacuum by going on Google and looking up all kinds of horror stories and misdiagnoses and information that perhaps comes from unreliable sources. Families can get very anxious and worried, and there's a real opportunity for us as church to get alongside families even at that early stage, perhaps to just be there with them on that journey, to be a friend to them, but also perhaps to steer them in the direction of more reliable information and support, perhaps to help them to get the right medical input and advice that they need, and to help them to pull away from going to unhealthier places like Google to get the information that they're looking for. As we've explored, not every child and young person receives a diagnosis quickly, and in some cases at all. There are plenty of children and young people who their families are aware that they're different in some way, but they don't have the clarity of the answer of what that means and what that looks like. And that uncertainty can be difficult for families. And again, an opportunity for us to get alongside families and love them and support them and help them to know that they're not alone as they grapple with the questions that they've got, that we can be with them, and we've got a great big God who's with them as well. For many families, though, that diagnosis will at some point arrive. As we mentioned just now, it could be pre-birth, it could be at birth, it could be in the early months or years of that child's life, it could be much later. But whenever that diagnosis comes, and however ready for it that family might think that they are, it can often still come as a shock to them. For families that might think that they've got the answer, they know already what they are expecting to hear from the medical professionals, they've researched it, they understand it fully, there might still be a tiny corner of their mind that is saying to them, there might be nothing there at all. Somebody might actually turn around and say, there's been a mistake, there's nothing at all that's different, or no disability or additional needs for your child at all. But when that diagnosis is delivered, that little corner of doubt is taken away. And families can still find themselves in a state of shock. Now, sometimes that diagnosis can be delivered by a doctor at a GP surgery or at a hospital or a clinic. And the next thing that families find is that they've finished that appointment, they're back outside on the street, and they're reeling from the news that they've received, even if they thought they were prepared for it. So there's, again, a real sense of shock and unpreparedness that families can experience in those moments. Sometimes it can help to have somebody with them who can just take them to a cafe after that news has been delivered. Give them a little bit of time just to start to think through what they've heard. If we can be a friend with those families at those meetings, maybe there's an opportunity for us to scribble some notes down that might be helpful. And then to sit and chat through what we've heard with that parent or carer or guardian, and to just help them to start that journey of becoming used to that diagnosis having arrived and all the implications that that might bring. But of course, that diagnosis can still bring a sense of fear for families, because they might now be fearful for what the future means for their child, for them as a family. What is going to be the future for their child further down the road, even when they as parents aren't around anymore? So many questions that will be in the hearts and minds of families that have just received a diagnosis, and a time again when just sitting with families, listening to them, we may not have all the answers for them, but being a listening ear and being willing to let them know that we're there for them, and that if they want to chat things through, if they just want to talk out loud and share their fears with somebody, then we'll do that confidentially and in love to support them and help them. Many families, when they receive a diagnosis, can be spiraled into what you may be aware of as the 5 stages of grief. The 5 stages of grief originally were put together to help understand and describe the emotions that somebody might go through when they receive a terminal diagnosis about themselves. But since then, it's been extended to include any major life change that can have real implications for that individual and perhaps their family. And so the 5 stages of grief can be very real for families of children and young people with additional needs. The 5 stages of grief start usually with denial, that sense that this can't be real, there must be a mistake, this can't be right, a pushing away of the news because it's so hard to hear and so difficult to understand. Denial can often be followed by anger, a fighting against that information, that diagnosis, that news. And often that anger can be turned towards others, to loved ones. It can be toxic. It can break families apart. It can be really, really hard. Bargaining comes next, and that's a way of trying to figure a way out of this. Is there a way of avoiding this in some way? For those of us with a faith, it can often mean asking God please take this away. Please change this. And many families will pray that prayer in those early stages just because it's too big to cope with. Please, Lord, just take this away. Let's wake up tomorrow and it's all gone away. But of course, it usually doesn't. And that then leads to the fourth stage of grief, which is depression. A realization that this isn't going away, that this is the reality. And for good or ill, this is the journey that as a family we're now on, and that our child or young person is going to be navigating. Ultimately, for some families, perhaps not all, the fifth stage of acceptance can be reached, a place where actually that the idea of this change in our lives and the lives of our child or young person begins to settle, and we can start to look to positive ways that we can move forward. Yes, there are some big changes, but maybe there are some positive things that can come from this as well. And so that sense of acceptance can start to form. But of course, we can go round and round and round again. I remember several years ago, my son James, who's 23 now, I was watching the 6 o'clock news, the BBC 6 o'clock news, and it was A-level results day. And there was lots of video of A-level students jumping around excitedly, waving their results papers, one or two towards the back of the room, not looking quite so happy about what they'd got. And it just struck me in that moment that that was James's year group. And that in a different world and on a different journey, my son James, who's got a range of different additional needs, would have been getting his A-level results that day. And it just for a moment spiraled me back into that 5 stages of grief again. And I just felt, an intense sadness about the fact that James's journey was so different to those students that I was watching on the TV screen. Well, as I was watching that and feeling sorry for myself and James in that moment, I heard James in his den belly laughing about something he was doing. And I went to see him and sat with him and enjoyed his company for a bit and regained a sense of acceptance as all those dark feelings drifted away. But that can be the experience of lots of families. Just because they get to acceptance, it doesn't always mean they stay there. They can be spiraled back by all sorts of triggers. In this case, an A-level results day and a broadcast on the BBC News. And so, one question that we would have for families as we explore this is, where are they in all of this? How are they feeling? What stage of this process do they find themselves in? There's a great story, which is called a short story called Welcome to Holland by Emily Pearl Kingsley. And in the story, she unpacks this a little bit more. She talks about how somebody's going on a holiday. They're planning a holiday to Italy. They've got their Italian phrase book. They know where they're going to go and the things they're going to see when they get to Rome. They've got friends that have been there before and have told them all the exciting things that Rome has to offer. And they get on the plane and they're heading off on their adventure. But as they're coming into land, the captain comes onto the radio to say there's been a change of plan. And actually, they're coming into Amsterdam Airport in Holland. And suddenly they find themselves at Amsterdam Airport Arrivals Hall, not quite knowing what's happened, why they're there, or what that means from now on. And of course, it's a metaphor for families who were expecting one destination for themselves and their child, but find themselves in a different place. And I've met lots of families that are metaphorically in Amsterdam Airport. Some of them are angry and in denial and still demanding to be taken to the place that they were expecting to go and refusing to accept where they are. That's a tough place to be. But I've also met families that have recognised that they're in somewhere new, somewhere different. They weren't planning to go there, but now they're there. they're going to make the most of it. And they discover that Holland is still a great place to be. There are tulips, there are canals, there are windmills, there are Rembrandts. And so the metaphor extends to all the different things that journeying with a child or young person with additional needs can bring. So I would encourage you to signpost families towards that Welcome to Holland short story from Emily Pearl Kingsley. That might help them. As might a book by Rachel and Andrew Wilson called The Life You Never Expected, and especially a chapter in it that Rachel wrote called The Orange, where, again, it's another metaphor. They're at a dinner party with friends. And at the end of the dinner party itself, the host brings out dessert. And for everybody else, that's a chocolate orange. But for Rachel and Andrew, it's a fruit orange. It's different to everybody else's. And they look at their orange and think, OK, what are we going to do with this? They haven't got any cutlery to help them. So they're just using their fingers to try and break the orange open. And they get squirted in the eye with the orange juice, and it stings. And they get into a right mess with it. And they're looking around the table at everybody else munching away happily on their chocolate orange and wondering, what's brought about this difference for them. And of course, it's a metaphor again for them having children and young people that are different to everybody else's. And sometimes it's messy, and sometimes you end up metaphorically squirted in the eye with orange juice and it stings. And sometimes it's hard. And Rachel, from a place of real honesty, admits in that chapter that there are times every now and then when she just wishes she had a chocolate orange like everyone else. In other words, she just wishes that her child was like everybody else's. It doesn't mean she doesn't love her child. She loves her child very much. But sometimes it's exhausting, and sometimes it's messy, and sometimes it's too hard. And that can be the experience of lots of families. And hearing that honesty is important, and recognizing that that's their truth, and that's actually the reality for many, many families is really important. So again, a great book to recommend to families. So how will it define them? How will it take families forward from that point? What will they choose? Will they choose to stay in denial and anger and depression and those negative parts of the cycle of grief? Or will they reach acceptance and look for the positive things to again, extend that metaphor from earlier of going out into Holland and finding all the great things that are there? It's really important to encourage families, to help families to reach that more positive point. Now, on that journey, there are lots and lots of places that those families will reach. Lots of milestones, transitions, rites of passage, places that are key in the life of a child or young person. In your workbooks, on pages 16 and 17, a few of those are unpacked a little bit more. Of course, transitions can be sometimes age related. They might relate to a child or young person moving from preschool to primary school, or then moving on to secondary school. In a church context, that could mean moving from creche to the children's work or Sunday school, and then on to the youth work, and then maybe even into main congregational work as well. And often, typically, those transitions can happen either side of the summer school holidays. So they might finish in one age group in July, head off on the summer holidays, and when they come back in September, they start again in their new group. Of course, for a child or young person with additional needs and the families that they're a part of, that might look different. It could be that that child or young person needs a longer time to transition from one age group to the next. But it can be a time in which families can often, again, notice the difference in their child. And that can be a trigger that can spiral them into that cycle of grief again. There can be faith-based rites of passage, like a christening or confirmation or baptism, for example. And I often get asked about things like confirmation or baptism. Is it possible for a child or young person who maybe doesn't have verbal communication and struggles to be able to share what they're thinking and what they want to communicate, to be able to be confirmed or to be baptized, because they may not be able to verbalize the responses that are required and asked for? My answer is always to look for the other signs of faith in that child or young person. When worship is happening at church, are they filled with a look of joy? Is the grace of God shining through them? Do they respond audibly to worship and prayer? It may not be in words, but in the sounds they make. Are they clearly connecting with God in some way? And is God connecting with them? My son James has almost no verbal communication, but he, when we pray together each night, has a look of joy on his face. He joins in occasionally with a word that he's able to articulate, or a sound that approximates that word. But I know that God's connecting with him, and that James is connecting with God, and that God knows James, and that James knows God and loves him. So, yeah, look for those other signs, but also help families to think about that as well, and to look for those signs too. There can be secular milestones and rites of passage. Those secular milestones could be the obvious developmental ones, like learning to crawl and to walk, developing speech, riding a bike, all sorts of things that we would expect a child or young person to work through. But of course, for some children and young people, that may be delayed. It may take a lot longer. It may not happen at all. And again, it's another time when families can be starkly exposed to the difference in their child compared to other children that might be happily running around at church when theirs can't, or might be happily chatting to their friends when their child can't speak and doesn't have any friends. So there are lots of those transitions, milestones, and rites of passage that can be hard for families to journey with and journey through. Have a look at the information that's on page 16 and through into page 17 of your workbooks. There's some really helpful stuff there, not least Kieran's story. You saw Kieran and Lynette at the beginning in the video clip that we watched together. Kieran unpacks a little bit more of his story in the workbook, and shares about how he was helped to stay in the children's and youth work at his church because they identified the things that he was really good at. Kieran's got a real talent for tech, and so they helped Kieran to develop that and use that skill and gift that he's got to support the children's and youth work in his church. And beyond that, he now supports Christian festival events in the summer because he's really gifted in that area. So do have a look at his story and the final thoughts that Kieran shares with us towards the end of page 17. So we've covered quite a bit in that session. Have a think about how that might be relevant to you in your context. Maybe you're watching this as a family member of a child or young person with additional needs. Maybe you are looking at this as a church member supporting a family and children, young people with additional needs. What might you do differently as a result of what we've looked at so far? What might you think differently as a result of the information that I've shared with you so far as well? So have a little think about the session that we've just looked at, and then when you've done that, have a break, get a little stretch in, maybe get a tea or a coffee or some water, and then in a few moments we'll start again with our second session. Welcome back. I hope you've had a helpful break and that you were able to have a think about some of what we've looked at in the first part of this module. As we continue on this journey, we're now going to start to think about more practical and pastoral support that we can give to families of children and young people with additional needs. You'll find notes about this in your workbooks on page 18 onwards. And so have your workbooks to hand as we explore this topic together. Practical support can come in many ways, and often in churches. The first place that churches go to provide practical support for families of children and young people with additional needs is to offer one-to-one support. In other words, to have somebody who can care for their child or young person when they're in church so that the family can be part of the main congregational worship, or to volunteer in other roles, or to be engaged in church in different ways whilst their child or young person is cared for by somebody else. Finding one-to-one volunteers can sometimes be a challenge for churches, but there are ways in which that process can be made easier. For example, starting off with something small like a church party, for example, and encouraging somebody to get alongside a child or young person and support them just for that 2 or 3 hours of the party can give somebody a little taster of what one-to-one support can be like. And often people will enjoy that and find it a really helpful and positive experience. And so then maybe something a little bit bigger might come along next. For example, a holiday club. You might run a holiday club for 2 or 3 mornings during a half term, and you could go back to the people that had helped out at the party and ask if they'd be willing to come along and help at the holiday club. A slightly longer commitment, but still a defined one, and so often folk will agree to that because they know that it's just for those 2 or 3 mornings, but they would quite like to support that child or young person during that time, help them to engage with what's going on at holiday club. Once they've done that, they're then much nearer to a place where they would be able to agree to being part of a team that supports a child or young person with additional needs on a more regular basis, perhaps on a Sunday morning. Not every week, but maybe once or twice a month. And so offering one-to-one support can really start to free up parents, carers, guardians, and help them to be able to engage in church in different ways. I know as a dad to a young man now with additional needs, that as James was growing up in church, the one-to-one support that he received helped us to be able to do all sorts of things. I was able to preach, teach, do youth work. My wife was able to be involved in our children's work. Our daughter was part of the worship band. And we were able to do all those things because one-to-one support was provided for our son. Respite can be another way that churches can support families. Secular respite has been cut right back because of the cost of living crisis, because local authorities have got very limited funding, and so the amount of respite support, in other words, going and supporting a child or young person in home, has been drastically cut back. As church, perhaps this is something that we could step into, forming a little team that could go and offer some respite support to families of children and young people with additional needs, maybe for a few hours, so that they can go out, go for a walk, go and get a coffee, or go and watch a movie, or spend some time investing in their relationship, because we know that relationships can come under a great deal of stress and strain. So a few hours to just spend time together and chatting together can really help and make a big difference. So respite support could be something that we could offer practically to help families. Drop-in events could be another way to help families to find out more about the journey they're on, but also to find out that they're not the only family that are on that journey. So you could arrange something like a Take 5 and Chat drop-in. Now, Take Five and Chat is run by my friend Beth Meller, and she helps churches to arrange these drop-in events for families to come to. There's tea, coffee, and cake for the families. There's some activities for the children and young people themselves. And the families just get the opportunity to share with each other, to chat with each other about the journey they're on, and to be helped to do that by one or two of the church folk who are there to facilitate that conversation. Have a think about whether that might be something you could offer to the families in your church. Help with everyday tasks. Often, because of the care needs of a child or young person with additional needs, families trying to hold down jobs and all the different things that they need to do. Sometimes just help with everyday tasks can be a real blessing. Whether that's getting some shopping in, picking up some medication from the pharmacy, helping to sort the garden out, or doing a bit of decorating. Those everyday practical tasks just help families to feel loved and noticed and appreciated, but it just helps them to keep their little ship afloat. So again, ask families, what practical things could we do to help you and to get alongside you? Money issues can be common for families of children and young people with additional needs. Poverty and disability are closely linked. There are all sorts of connections between them. And so often families of children and young people with additional needs can find themselves struggling financially. We can signpost families towards support. For example, we can signpost them towards places that they could get practical advice about managing their finances, like Christians Against Poverty, for example, who are brilliant at supporting families out of poverty and helping them to get on a more stable financial basis. We could think about having a food bank or signposting towards food banks in the area to help families there as well. Meetings. Endless meetings that families have to go to when they have a child or young person with additional needs. And what's often not communicated very well is that families are entitled to take somebody with them, a friend or other family member with them to those meetings. And having somebody there can make a huge difference. Often you're sat around a table with a whole bunch of professionals that are talking about your child. It can be quite daunting and intimidating. But having a friendly face next to you can really build confidence and help family members to feel better about the meeting that they're at. There's also the opportunity for that friendly face to be scribbling notes down because the parent or carer or guardian might be engaged in the conversation about their child and not have time to write down all the things that they might want to capture about the meeting. Their friend could do that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, afterwards, an opportunity to perhaps take that parent, carer or guardian for a coffee, to have a chat, to unpack what's happened at the meeting, rather than them just finding themselves on the street outside of the place where the meeting was happening, reeling from everything that they've been hearing. I've mentioned dads and siblings here because they can often be overlooked groups. As a dad of a child with additional needs, I find that there was very little support available for me. And so I formed something called the Dad's Fire Circle, a place for dads to gather and come together and share with each other. And again, just to recognise that they're not alone. There are other dads out there that are on a similar journey to them. And siblings can be an often overlooked group. I've mentioned our daughter Phoebe, and she was growing up. She had distinct support needs of her own. She'd sometimes be a junior carer at home to help us look after James. She would sometimes miss out on stuff because plans would have to change at the last minute because James was struggling to cope. Sometimes she would be bullied because she had a brother with additional needs. So those siblings can have a range of support needs of their own, and we need to think about them and think about how to support them better. A great place to signpost siblings to and the families they're a part of is SIBS. a support network for siblings. And there's information about SIBS and a link to their website in your workbooks. I've got lockdown there. Why have I got lockdown there? That was 5, nearly 6 years ago. Well, the reason I've mentioned it is because many of the challenges that families face today still stem all that way back to when COVID came and when lockdown happened. So many of the support services that they relied on shut down for lockdown and never reopened or only partially reopened. And so there are big gaps in the care and support network that is offered now by the secular world. A real opportunity for us to step in and support those families in the faith-based and church-based world. What about pastoral support? Well, often these are areas that get overlooked because we're focused so much on the practical stuff that we want to offer to families of children and young people with additional needs that we forget about the pastoral support needs that they might have and how we could address those as well. One of them is around spiritual feeding and development, because, of course, a primary function of us as church is to spiritually feed, develop, and grow the congregation, the folk that come to our church, whether that's children, young people, or adults. Often because family members are supporting their child or young person in church, they don't get spiritually fed and developed themselves. They might be spending all their time in the children's work as the de facto one-to-one help for their child. And that's why it's important that we recruit other one-to-one support so that those family members can be part of the congregation and to hear the message of the love of Jesus and to respond to that. And maybe to be able to serve their community in different ways as well. It's really important that we think about that two-way receiving and serving. So we're not just serving families that have a child or young person with additional needs, but we're receiving from them. We're giving them opportunities to serve us as church community. And of course, we want to engage those families in all the aspects of church life. That could include home groups, for example. And so as part of that respite provision that we were talking about just now, there could be an opportunity for us to have a couple of our team that go and childmind the child or young person that we're thinking about, so that parents can go to a home group and to learn and grow and develop there as well. Linking families together is really important. I talked about Take 5 and chat and about how that bringing families together can be really fruitful and helps families to not feel alone. But it also helps families to go on their faith journey together as well. I know in some locations where perhaps in addition to or perhaps instead of a home group, there's been a specific home group formed of families of children and young people with additional needs, so that they can unpack the topics, the Bible passages, the things that the home group might be looking at, but in a way that reflects their journey, their needs, the way in which those passages speak directly to them as families of children and young people with additional needs. So that can sometimes be a fruitful way forward to support families pastorally. Sharing stories can be really good. And what I mean by sharing stories is every family of a child or young person with additional needs will be somewhere on that scale from wanting to talk about everything and share about everything with the rest of the congregation, through to the other end of the scale, which is not wanting to say anything at all and keeping it a secret and not wanting to even disclose that their child has got additional needs at all. But for the families that are willing to share more and talk more about the journey they're on, then being able to talk about that to their church community, to their congregation, can help them to be able to just articulate their journey and share that journey. That speaking about it can be helpful for them. But for the congregation, it can help the congregation to understand the needs that family has and the journey that family is going on. It might help to the congregation to understand why sometimes that family arrives 10 minutes after the service has started. And they notice that when they arrive, some people look at them and stare and then look at their watches and mutter to the person next to them about how that family's late again. Whereas actually arriving at all is a massive win. Just being 10 minutes late is really something to be celebrating and to think about how to, to welcome families that are in that situation. So sharing stories can be really effective. Of course, a listening ear is very much what pastoral support is all about. We have two ears and one mouth, and using them in that ratio can be really important in pastoral support. So just helping families to know that at any time we're willing to hear them and to hear from them. And sometimes it's just sitting and listening as they share and cry and talk about how hard it is. And we may not have the answers to that, but by being a listening ear, it can help. But we can also signpost them towards services like the Befriender service from Care for the Family. Care for the Family set up a service where they will link families to another family that's further down that road that they can call whenever they need to for a chat, for a bit of advice, just to offload. And the Befriender service is a great success. So we can signpost families to that service from Care for the Family. Again, information about it is in your workbooks, and I'll summarise all of that again in a few minutes. A treat. This is something that started around COVID time as well, when to help families know that they weren't forgotten. It was important to just sometimes rock up with a treat for them, to leave a meal on their doorstep, to just do something that was a practical expression of love and support for them. And that today could be arranging to pop round and childmind their child with additional needs for them, and bring a voucher for Costa, so that as family they could go to Costa, get a coffee, have a bit of time, relationally together, while somebody is looking after their child. Think about how to treat families of children and young people with additional needs. Just doing that helps them to know that they're loved, that they're not marginalized, that they're not left out, but that they are noticed and appreciated. And of course, remember to pray. So important to pray, to center all that we're doing through prayer, to bring the families that we're thinking about into God's presence, to help him to share with us how to support those families better, how to practically and pastorally get alongside those families and help them with the day-to-day stuff that they need to get done, but also the spiritual stuff that's so important for them to engage with as well. So let's bring those families into God's presence in prayer as often as we can as well. There's lots of information in your workbooks that gives you more signposts towards some of the things that I've been talking about in that practical and pastoral support section. You'll find on page 22 and 23, there's loads of information there. Of course, there are the additional needs pages of the Urban Saints website as well. So do go to urbansaints.org/additional needs, and there are resources there that can be helpful to you. It will signpost you towards training that's available, identify resources that you can access and use, communities that you can join that can help you as you go on this journey as well. So do have a look at the Urban Saints website. The additional needs page is there. Also have a look at the Additional Needs Alliance. There's a whole bunch of information there that will be supportive for you as you are caring for children and young people with additional needs. There's a website packed with resources. There's also a Facebook group. And in the Facebook group, you'll find a community of children's, youth, families, workers, church leaders, practitioners, parents, carers, guardians, folk that are caring for and supporting children and young people with additional needs. So go and have a look at page 31 in your workbooks for more information about the Additional Needs Alliance. And if you use Facebook, come and join us there. There's nearly 4,000 of us, and we'd love to welcome you and to journey with you and to support and help you and answer any other questions that you've got along the way. On page 22 and 23 in your workbooks, you'll find links to all of these organisations that can provide support for you and for the families that you are journeying with. I've talked about some of them. I've mentioned about Care for the Family. Carers Trust has a young carers part to it, which again is another place that we can signpost young people who are carers themselves for their brother or sister. So have a think about passing that information on. I've mentioned Christians Against Poverty, the great work they do in lifting families out of poverty and putting them on a stable financial platform. Citizens Advice can be another place where good financial advice can be received. SIBS I've mentioned as the place to go to again signpost brothers and sisters, siblings of children and young people with additional needs. They have all kinds of support available. They have regional gatherings of siblings where they do all sorts of fun things together. And it helps those siblings to know that they're not the only ones who are caring for a brother or sister with additional needs. There are other siblings out there just like them. I talked about Take 5 and Chat, who organise those drop-in sessions with tea, coffee and a cake for families to come to, and with activities for the children to engage with, so that families can come together and share with each other. I talked briefly about the Dad's Fire Circle, a place to gather dads together and help them to share their journey. And then there's the Trussell Trust, which is one of the primary places that puts food banks into churches. And there's information about them and where their food banks are located in your workbooks there as well. So a wealth of information that you can use yourself or that you can signpost families towards to help them practically on their journey. So again, I'm going to give you an opportunity now to have a think about how this is relevant for you in your context as a family member, as a church member. How will you think differently as a result of what we've looked at in this section? What might you do differently with the information that we've unpacked and gone through together? How will you use that positively, practically, pastorally to support the families that you're journeying with? So have a think about that for a few minutes, and then we'll have a look at the case studies together. Okay, hopefully you've had a little think about the section that we've just looked at. So now we're going to have a look at the case studies, and I'm going to get you to pick a case study. You'll find them on page 28 and 29 in your workbook. There are 4 to choose from. So you've got Leah, who's 4 and has an undiagnosed additional need, probably an intellectual or learning disability, but it's not yet been finalised. Liam, who's 10, who's autistic with learning difficulties. Lily, who's 13 and has Down syndrome. And Luke, who's 16 and has a profound physical and mental disability. What I would love you to do is to pick one of the case studies, have a read of it, have a think about how to support that family practically and pastorally. What of the tools that we've looked at could you use to help that family better? Where could you signpost them towards to receive the help that they might so badly need? How can you think about each of the individual members of the family and what their distinct support needs might be? So pick a case study, have a look at it, spend some time exploring what that looks like. And you could go through all of them if you would like to. Of course, when you're doing this for real with the families that you journey with, you'd be doing that with them, because it's so important that we do inclusion with people and not unto them. And so, in reality, you do this alongside the family that you would be journeying with. But for now, to practice, have a look at a case study and see how you get on with that. Pause this video whilst you have a look at the case study. I hope you enjoyed having a look at the case study that you chose, or maybe you had a look at more than one, and that you came up with some great ideas to help that family in the situation that they're in, and how each member of the family could be supported better. Hopefully that will give you some confidence as you explore this and look at this with the families that you're journeying with in your context. As we come in towards the end of our module, I wanted to share with you a final word from a mum, from a family member. We started with that video sharing the stories of a couple of families, and I wanted to also allow another family to be heard as we bring our module to a conclusion. Over a number of years at Urban Saints, through the Disabled Children's Partnership, through the Additional Needs Alliance and other channels, we've been reaching out to families to find out how they've been doing. And one mum responded to a request for input that we pushed out through the Additional Needs Alliance. And this is what she said: "Notice us. We will always cope and be okay because we don't have any other choice. See beyond the bravado and offer us something to make sure we know you're taking us with you. It could be as simple as noticing that someone isn't at church, whether that's online or in building, and calling them to check that everything is okay. If things are tough for us, drop your sermon notes round with a cappuccino sachet and a cake so that the parents can take 5 and do church together. Mostly, though, just notice us." Such a really important thing to hear, isn't it? That sense of perhaps not being noticed, of being marginalised, of being overlooked, that is coming through in what that mum is sharing. Right at the beginning, we heard from Kieran, who said, "We're just like anyone else. We want to be a part of everything that's going on. Let us." And here at the end, we're hearing from a mum who says, "Notice us." Let's make sure we respond to both of those, please, as we take forward all that we've learned in this module about supporting families of children and young people with additional needs. You might have some questions as a result of this module. If you do, then please be in touch. My email address is on the screen now, and I would love to hear from you. So do be in touch if I can be of any help, if you've got any questions that you have, or if you want to chat through a scenario or a situation to perhaps unpack it and get a bit of help and advice. I'm up for that. So do be in touch. I would love to hear from you. But I hope you found this module helpful, and that hopefully you'll connect with others of our modules as part of the Additional Needs Practitioners Self-Paced Learning Programme. Thanks for being here in this module.